Today, we, of course, are talking about the national parks of Alaska. On this particular itinerary that we're going to be talking about, we are going to visit 5 of the 8 national parks, just on the land program itself, on the 12-day land program. We're going to start with visit to Katmai. We're going to take you over to Wrangell St. Elias, our largest national park in the U.S. We'll then travel up north of the Arctic Circle and visit Gates of the Arctic National Park. Of course, a visit to Alaska and the interior would not be complete if we didn't visit Denali. So again, we'll feature Denali and Kantishna, and then we'll head down onto the Kenai Peninsula and visit Kenai Fjords National Park, where we will spend a couple of nights in Seward. That said, there are 3 other national parks that are not highlighted on this particular itinerary, but can, of course, be included or added to. We have had a number of clients now over the last 5-6 years that have come up and collected stamps at all 8 national parks. Kobuk Valley, right there above the Arctic Circle. That's a day trip out of Anchorage where guests would fly up to Kotzebue and then fly in a small little puddle jumper plane over to see the great sand dunes of Kobach Valley. Another easy day trip out of Anchorage is over to Lake Clark. It's about 85-90 miles as the crow flies to the west of Anchorage. And then for those that are thinking of cruising the Inside Passage, and we will feature this, of course, at the end as well, with our small boat partners, Alaska Dream Cruise or the Platinum Catamaran, then we can, of course, take in Glacier Bay. All said, 8 national parks in Alaska. That puts it only behind California in terms of states with the most national parks. But in terms of land mass and area, Alaska is by far the largest in terms of protected federal lands. We have over 55 million acres of designated national park land in Alaska. That's almost 2 to 1 for the rest of the nation in terms of park land. Generally speaking, when you look up national parks of Alaska, this is a pretty common itinerary of what you'll find. Guests coming to Fairbanks, visiting Denali National Park, traveling south through Anchorage and on to Seward to visit Kenai Fjords National Park. And then, of course, if they're doing the cruise, and I'm not sure who designed this map, but they're a little bit off. Glacier Bay doesn't sit out here in the Gulf of Alaska. It actually sits right here on our map. But that would be a traditional national parks tour for Alaska. And it's not a bad tour by any means. It's a great tour. But one of the things that we've really dialed ourselves in on, and the experience that we want to provide to our clients over the years at John Hall's Alaska is, getting you off the beaten path, showing clients the advantage of traveling in smaller groups versus groups of 50, 60, 70 to 100 or more. Smaller is, in my opinion, certainly better, especially when it comes to Alaska. Now, we are a motor coach operator, and we have 6 motor coaches in our fleet. But as you can see from this map that's actually found in our catalog, if you happen to have a copy of one of our catalogs in front of you there available to you, this is pages 44 and 45. But what you'll see on this map, that it's really hard to see a number of Alaska's national parks if you don't have the ability to get off the beaten path and get in the air and fly to them, or take a dog sled team to them. But in this case, we're going to spend a number of days on the motor coach, but we're also going to travel by air, we're going to travel by small boat, and we're going to travel by rail. So this is really the planes, trains, and automobiles, and like I said, the gold standard of really, I would say, not just in our portfolio, but I would say as good as any tour that can be found in the state of Alaska, this national park tour. And I'm going to take you day by day through this itinerary. As I said, our motor coach is our main vessel of transportation. As many of you know from attending these programs in the past, our motor coaches are much like any of the motor coaches that you would see traveling the highways or interstates around the lower 48. When they're built by MCI or Prevost, another manufacturer of these motor coaches, they are 45-foot long motor coaches, and they are set up to accommodate 56 or 57 people when they're manufactured. Our motor coach fleet is custom built. We have 5 rows of seats removed. Traditionally, before COVID, we would take as many as 42 people on a tour. Now in the post-COVID era, 2020, 21 and beyond, we're looking to operate only with 24 passengers. And that actually sets up really well for us, because with trips like our National Park Tour and our Three Bears of Alaska Tour, we were already reducing our traveler load to 28 prior to COVID. So if you can imagine, when you're sitting on this motor coach, the amount of comfort and legroom that you're going to have with only 24 people on board, what you really have is one client or one family, one group of spouses or traveling companions in every row. And then, of course, with COVID, we'll put one group here. Nobody would be across from you or in front of you or behind you. They'd be catty corner in the next row. So it's going to be very spacious. And then, of course, one of the other great features of our motor coaches, besides some of the great roads and travel ways we can access with them, is the onboard amenities, of course, like the restroom that's on board, but also the galley in the back that has the Keurig coffee maker and bottled water. There's tea and lemonade, all kinds of different beverages to keep you hydrated along the way. Us being Norwegians and Irishmen, we love to have our coffee. So of course we have our Caribou coffee in the back, which we think goes appropriate for the destination of Alaska. And as, again, many of you know, and some of you have traveled with us previously, the reviews that come back on our tours are exceptional, but it's amazing to me how people talk more about the John Hall team that hosted them and took them around the state and introduced them to destinations that they love. These are people who have lived in Alaska for 20, 30, 40, 45 years in the case of Matt. And they come back every summer, or they dedicate their summer to us, break away from families oftentimes, so that they can show you what the best of Alaska offers. Now, with this particular itinerary, our team will meet you at the airport in Anchorage. Doesn't matter if you're arriving in morning, noon, or night. We'll meet you at the airport. We'll get you transferred over to your accommodations in Anchorage, which will be the Lakefront Hotel. A lot of our guests, especially with COVID, are coming in at least a day ahead of time. Some of them are doing that with the potential that there might be some type of requirements for testing in terms of a negative COVID test. I believe if you're coming, especially from Florida or the East Coast, you're looking at a 4-hour time change. Coming in a day or two ahead of time certainly doesn't hurt, helps get you acclimated for the journey that's in front of you for the next 13, 14 days. So as the itinerary sets, we'll spend 2 nights in Anchorage at the Lakefront Hotel overlooking Lake Hood. The very first full day of the tour after our arrival day, we're going to visit our very first national park. And this is a prime example of how we're going to travel by many different means of transportation in Alaska. Early on the morning, I guess that is if I remember correctly, a Tuesday morning, you'll wake up in Anchorage, you'll be taken over back to the airport where you came in, and you'll fly from Anchorage over here to King Salmon, Alaska. And once in King Salmon, you'll actually board float planes and fly into Katmai National Park, across the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, and into Brooks Falls. And as you can see, on a typical day in July, which is when this itinerary operates, it's not uncommon to have 150 to 200 people visiting Katmai National Park in a single day. That month of July is really the best time to see Katmai and Brooks Falls, because that's when the salmon are, of course, running. So a lot of these float planes that you see here lined up on the shore, they actually flew in from Anchorage, which is about a 3-hour float plane trip from Anchorage over here to Brooks Falls. But we'll do it a little bit differently, fly with one of the regional air carriers into King Salmon, and then take the float plane into, which is about a 25-minute flight then, into to Brooks Falls here. The first thing that you do when you arrive into Brooks Falls in Katmai National Park, and it doesn't matter if you've been here before, if you were there the day before, last week, or the week prior, everybody who comes in has to go to bear school. So after you disembark that aircraft, you'll walk up the beach and into the main campus. And you'll actually go through a short school and a video on what's appropriate and what's not appropriate when it comes to viewing these bears. It's pretty self-explanatory, pretty straightforward. Don't carry any food on you. Obviously, the safety of everybody that's visiting Katmai is imperative, and we're very happy to say that in terms of the visitor population coming into Katmai, there's never been a mauling of a human being here at Brooks Falls. So it's just being smart and having some common sense while you're out there. But you can see from the main campus, the Bear Bridge, the first platform that goes across the Bear Bridge to the south platform. And then there is a little bit of a walking trail that goes up here, probably about 3/4 of a mile, all the way up to the falls platform, which is the most photographed place probably in Katmai National Park. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. So as with a lot of our adventure programs, we tell people it's a good idea to make sure that you can be able to walk a couple miles at a time. With this particular program, that's a prime example where you're walking from the main campus, main camp up to the falls platform, which is a little over a mile, as you see there. To the brooks is 1.2 miles. So the first, after you leave Bear School, the first bridge that you're going to cross, and this was actually newly constructed in 2019, so it's a really nice additive to the visit at Brooks, and really I think one of the better places to actually start viewing the bears, which can happen as soon as you land on your plane. You can see the bears walking on the beach. But a lot of times the smaller bears and the mother bears, the sows with the cubs, they don't want to be up at the falls. They don't want to fight with the big boars. So they'll stay down here and they'll catch their fish right here in the river where the water's a little bit calmer. And I've actually had some of my best pictures while at Brooks taken right here. And that's, of course, just simply those bears chasing those sockeye salmon or those red salmon in the water and trying to get a nice little piece of lunch. As you work your way up the trail, this is the view from the upper falls. Now what happens here, they only allow about 20 people out on that platform at a time, and so they rotate every 20 minutes. Your name is called on a list. So we always encourage people, as soon as you get out of Bear School, make your way up to the falls and get your name on the list. So if it is a day where they've got a couple hundred visitors, you're not having to worry about not getting your opportunity to get up there on the platform. But that 20 minutes is certainly enough, and I like the way that they do that. Because that way you don't have somebody with a great big lens hogging all the time up there at the falls, not allowing each of us to get in there. But this is like I said, the iconic destination for bear viewing in Alaska. To stand here and have your picture taken with those brown bears over your shoulders. Those are 11 or 1,200 pound brown bears that are feeding there. And they do get testy. And that's why I said a lot of the sows with the cubs, they'll stay down near the lower platform in the river area because they don't want to mess with these big boars. And they will get after one another. If you're really lucky, that right there will make the hair on the back of your neck stand up when you hear the vibration. It's like the lions roaring in Africa. If you're really lucky, you'll capture that iconic shot where that sockeye salmon jumps in the air, or that pink salmon jumps in the air, and that brown bear catches it in its mouth right there. It has a nice little lunch. And of course, if you eat as much salmon as some of these bears do, well, of course, then you have to take a nap. And sometimes those bears do take a nap on the trail that leads to and from the falls. So again, this is just common sense. That bear has the right of way. All bears have right of way in Alaska. So if he wants to take a nap right there, well, you're going to stand down here with the rest of your group and just wait for him to get up and mosey along his way. That's just part of I think that's part of the awesome opportunities that are available to people coming into Katmai National Park and to Brooks Falls for the day. So we'll return back to Anchorage. We'll have dinner as a group that evening. And then the next day, we're going to set out across the Glen Highway and the Matanuska Valley, which in Alaska, the Matanuska Valley was the area designated by President Roosevelt as part of the New Deal. This is the rich, fertile farmland of Alaska. So you'll see some amazing flowers and great vegetation. We're going to stop for lunch here at the Sheep Mountain Lodge. And then after lunch, we'll kind of whip and wind around the Glen Highway, and we'll make a stop at the Matanuska Glacier. And this is the largest inland glacier left in Alaska today. This picture was actually captured by one of our multi-star generals. I would say Mr. Griffin. Now, Norm Griffin's probably been to Alaska 5 or 6 times with us, and at least a couple times on his own. So the gentleman certainly loves Alaska. But you can see these inland or valley glaciers that have crept down through the mountains and the valleys, and hence the name, the Valley Glacier here. And of course, if you look beyond that, you can also see what we call the alpine or hanging glaciers as well, ups in the saddles and tops of these mountains along the Chugach mountain range. We're going to, of course, start our day here in Anchorage, if you're looking on the map, and we're going to go out across the Glen Highway. It's about 85 miles over there to where we have lunch, and then a few more miles up the road to where the glacier is at. At the end of our day, about 180 miles from Anchorage, we'll find ourselves at Glen Allen. And just outside of Glen Allen, we'll actually pull into an airport and we'll offload, and half the group will fly in to Wrangell St. Elias National Park on about a 25 to 30 minute flight scene trip into McCarthy and Kennecott. And then the planes will come back and get the other part of the group and the driver, and we too will fly in. This is one of the most magnificent flight scene tours in Alaska. You're truly getting a really good appreciation for these glacial ice fields, the beautiful ice fields that will fly across the Wrangell and St. Elias Mountains are home to 4 of the 5 highest peaks in North America. They're right on the Pacific Plate, where the Pacific Plate pushes up out of the ocean and climbs to some 19,500 feet in the case of Mount Logan. So we'll fly across the across the Wrangell and St. Elias Mountains. And as you come into McCarthy and Kennecott, you get a real good overview of the historic nature of this particular national park. In 1910, 1912, all the way to 1918, this particular mine right here, the Kennecott Copper Mines, was the busiest and most profitable mining project in all of the United States. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Kennecott Corporation. They still actively mine in New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado today. But the copper that they were pulling out of this particular mine was so rich, it came at about a 75% pure copper grade. In fact, they had enough pilings of silver to pay for the entire mine project itself. But unfortunately, with World War I, the pending World War I, they shut that mine down in 1918, and it sits today as a national historic national historic site on the registry, the historic registry. So while we're in our 2 nights here in Kennecott and McCarthy, you can actually see over here on the right side of the screen that it's going to be our hotel for 2 nights, the Kennecott Glacier Lodge. And we'll spend 2 nights here at the beautiful lodge. Again, breakfast, lunch, and dinner will actually be served here at the facility. You do a lot of those kind of at your own pace. No buffets, of course, because of COVID, but indoor and outdoor seating. Beautiful place to sit down and have breakfast or a cup of coffee in the morning and overlook the Chugach Mountains and the Root Glacier out there in front of you. That full day that we have inside the park itself will actually, again, break up into 2 smaller pods, a dozen people in each one, and we'll come up here to the mine itself, to the old mill. And we're actually going to tour through all 13 levels of this mill. Now that means a pretty hefty walk up the hill and 13 levels of stairs coming back down through the mill. So if you're not comfortable with making that trip, there are other buildings like the leaching plant and power plant here that you can tour through while the rest of your group is going through the mill. But the folks from Kennecott Copper Guides will give us a trip through the mill. They'll give you a full history of the mill, take you through each of the different 13 levels as you work your way down through the mill. And to see some of the gears and gauges and different mechanisms that they use in the engineering feat really that went into creating this, you can understand why it's such an impressive landmark on our registered places. That afternoon, so we'll spend the morning in the mill at the mine there, and then that afternoon after lunch, guests will have an opportunity to either go downtown and visit the ghost town community or the sister community of McCarthy, or they can take a hike up onto the Root Glacier. This is the glacier that can be seen from your hotel. So if that's something you want to do, you can certainly do that as well. And there's the old historic town site of McCarthy itself. After our 2 nights inside the park, we will fly back out of the park, back to Gakona. We'll have lunch in Gakona, and then we'll follow the Alaska pipeline up the Richardson Highway. You'll get a chance to see where it operates above ground and then also below ground. There's about 800 miles worth of pipeline that run from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, down to Valdez. About half of that, almost half, 422 miles sits above ground, and about 380 miles sits below the Earth's surface. When we arrive Fairbanks, which will be our destination for the next 2 evenings, we'll spend 2 nights here at the Bear Lodge. While at the Bear Lodge, it sits on the campus of the Fountainhead Hotels, and that's home to the Fountainhead Auto Museum. You'll actually, as part of your stay at the property, when you get your welcome packet that has your room keys and vouchers for dinner in it, you'll have 2 tickets or access vouchers to get you into the museum as well. And this is the largest private collection of cars built before World War II in all of North America. In fact, Tim, who owns the Fountainhead hotels in this museum, he oftentimes takes these cars, one of his favorites or two of his favorites, down to Pebble Beach to the big car show there every year. So it's really fascinating. All of these cars operate. In fact, there are times on a nice summer day that you'll see Tim driving one of these cars around the property. But what's really neat is not only do they have the vehicles, and these are impeccable, but also period clothing that goes with each of the vehicles. So it's a nice place to spend an hour and a half easy in the evening upon arrival into to Fairbanks. And you can do that either the first night that you're there or the second night when we come back from Barrow. The other attraction that we'll participate in that evening is a visit to the Trailbreaker Kennels. Now, this is really a special stop. This particular picture was taken from the Riverboat Discovery. That's something that a lot of visitors will do when they come to Fairbanks every summer. Most of our itineraries will participate in that 3-hour trip down the Chena and Tanana rivers as well. This particular national park tour does not take the riverboat, but we do come here to spend time at the Trailbreaker Kennels. And this is kind of a peek behind the scenes of what life is like in a dog camp in Alaska. And what really makes this one special, this property was home, in fact, that cabin right there was home to the late dog mushing champion Susan Butcher. And that's her husband, Dave Munson, who's quite the dog musher himself, even though he won't brag about this. He did win the Yukon Quest, the other 1,000-mile race in the North Country in 1989. After losing Susan to leukemia in 2006, David continued his commitment to John Sr. and to our family and groups. And he's invited us into his home for years now, where we get a chance to go and meet the dogs and meet his family. Here's a picture of Dave that I took summer of 2019 with his 2 daughters that help him run the camp today. But it's a real good chance to get, again, a personalized look and a behind-the-scenes look of what life is like for the Alaska people. And I don't know if any of you have been to a house or maybe live near a property that has multiple dogs. If you can imagine what a property would smell like and what it would take to keep it clean if you had 65 or 70 mushing dogs. You come in here to the Trailbreaker Kennels, and it's hard to believe when you drive in that you don't smell that doggy smell. It doesn't even feel like he has 2 dogs on campus. But they do have anywhere from 55 to 65 dogs on campus, and you can see exactly how clean, and in particular, David is about his kennels. He told me a long time ago, I said, Dave, these platforms that you build for the dogs, I said, those aren't cheap. Plus, with the upkeep to sustain them and make sure that they can endure the winter and the summer with the heat and the cold that Fairbanks gets. He says, John, the cost of building one of these platforms is a fraction of what it costs if one of my dogs eats one of these rocks, which they will. They'll pick up and nibble on the rocks. And of course, to take that dog to the vet and have those rocks removed from his stomach, that's a pretty high price to pay. So Dave really has a good understanding of what it takes to operate a super clean and healthy kennel, but also, of course, he puts the focus on the health of the dog in front of everything else. So this is really, again, I can't say enough about the Trailbreaker Kennel. We'll spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours here with Dave and the girls, learn about the dog mushing. And then, of course, before you leave, you'll have to do a shakedown and do a puppy check to make sure nobody snuck any dogs inside their purse or inside their coat when they left. This is a picture of my son, Emerson, when I took him up 2 years ago. And I'm going to tell you how hard it was to get that dog away from him. All of a sudden, his dog back home didn't matter. He thought he needed one more. And I can relate. I've been down that road with my father. But that's the kind of, I think, relation that we want you to have with the Alaskan people, but also that emotional connection we want you to have with the destination and these puppies as well. It makes a visit to Fairbanks pretty special. So the next day, after our first night in Fairbanks, first of 2 nights, we're going to go ahead and we're going to fly again. We're going to go over to the Fairbanks airport, and we're going to get into some Chieftain Navajos, which are 8-passenger planes, and we're going to fly from Fairbanks up across the Arctic Circle and into gates of the Arctic National Park, where we'll visit the community of Anaktuvuk. And then from there, we'll continue on, and we're actually going to go all the way to the top of the world, and we're going to visit Barrow. We'll spend a few hours in Barrow, and then we'll return back to Fairbanks later that evening. So the flight up to Anaktuvuk and on to Barrow, like I said, will be in these Chieftain Navajos. These are 8-person planes. So we'll probably have 3, 4 of those planes in our posse as we fly up and make the journey into Gates of the Arctic. The Gates of the Arctic is a playland for the outdoor adventure. There's some of the best hunting and fishing and some of the most beautiful braided rivers in all of Alaska. The reason that Anaktuvuk exists is that this community is pretty special. They were the last of the nomadic people, and they settled here in the late 1970s with the encouragement of a gentleman named Noel Ween, who was a flight operator out of Fairbanks. And the reason he did that is he really recommended that these nomadic people found a place that they could call home so they could focus on education for the children, building a future, but also to set up some type of transportation and trade route to get goods and services into and out of Anaktuvuk. So there's no roads in or out of Anaktuvuk. If you want to get in or get out, you probably have to have a 4-wheeler plane or, like I said, a dog sled team. But we'll spend a couple hours here. We'll go ahead and visit the Memorial Museum, where you get a really good chance, a really good understanding of these very proud Native Alaskans and their masks, their caribou masks, and this tools and the trades and even the homes that they would live in before they became a more permanent fixture here in Anaktuvuk. So again, yeah, probably about a half hour, 45 minutes at the museum. A chance to meet some of the locals, probably talk to some of the ladies about the skinning and the subsistence living that still exists today. And then we'll reboard those planes and head for Barrow, Alaska. Barrow, of course, top of the world, the northernmost point in North America. This community was actually set up because of the U.S. Government and the military as a dew line. But today there's over 5,000 people that live in Barrow, Alaska. These are the Inupiaq people. Very proud, again, Native Alaskan people. And we'll have a chance to spend a few hours here in Barrow, or Utqiagvik, if you want to follow the appropriate name. This is the traditional name of Barrow. Of course, again, understanding the tribal meaning, and of course the way of life here, and the whale bones and the subsistence living that goes along with living here at the top of the world. And of course, an understanding too of what life is like in a community where the sun doesn't set for 60 days and also doesn't rise for 60 days when it comes to the middle of the winter. Of course, everybody will have a chance after we visit the Inupiaq Heritage Center. We'll take you out on the point there on the peninsula, and you'll have a chance to put your foot or to take a full dive into the Arctic Ocean. Some of our guests have done that in the past, done the polar bear plunge. Most just dip a foot or toe or maybe up to their ankle in before they call it quits. You know, daytime temperatures in Barrow, Alaska in July on average, the high is right around 47 degrees. So you can imagine that water, and you probably saw in that first picture I showed you, the ice pack wasn't that far away even in July. So yeah, you can imagine those waters are probably 38, 39 degrees. Again, this is one of those places, though, that I can't stress enough that this is real Alaska. You know, being in Central Texas, and I don't know if any of you were in Texas with me, but I know the national media has been focusing a little bit on Texas and what we went through last week with the snowstorm. And, you know, I kind of giggled about it because I said, well, we call this Wednesday where I come from in Minnesota. And, you know, this is just a blip in on the screen in Alaska. You know, we had people that were going to the grocery store and buying every bag of Lay's chips that they could get their hand on and every bottle of water possible. And I think we take for granted how lucky we are to be able to have the choice of going to Randall's or going to H-E-B or Super Value or whatever grocery store, Walmart, Super Walmart, Target, all of these grocery chains across the U.S. You know, in Barrow, Alaska, they have one grocery store. So this subsistence style of living is something that many of our clients will encounter during their time in Barrow. What you see there is that seal meat that's hanging. Oftentimes you'll see fish hanging there as well, maybe whale meat if it's later in the year. Of course, you see the seal skin wrapped up. They're going to use every bit of that animal possible. And the reason that subsistence living is so important you look at the prices. If you go into the grocery store, and this is something we encourage you to go in there and make a donation, if you will, to the local economy and buy something as a memory to bring home with you. Maybe not mayonnaise or Miracle Whip, but it gives you a good perspective as to the cost of goods when you get into rural Alaska. To see this Miracle Whip right here, it's $13.65 for a jar of Miracle Whip. Best Foods light mayonnaise is $7 a jar. You'll see bottled water for $3-4. So you really, again, puts in perspective the fortune that we have and how much rural and native Alaska really depends on that subsistence living. Even though sometimes we don't like to see that, that's very much a reality. After we return to Fairbanks and spend our second night in Fairbanks after flying back from Barrow, we will board the Alaska Railroad and we'll take the train from Fairbanks. It's about 4 hours down here to Denali National Park. Denali National Park is composed of 6 million acres when you consider the park and the preserve that was added in 1980. And during our time here in Denali, we're going to spend 2 nights. Now, on this particular itinerary, we're going to spend those 2 nights deep inside the park. When you come in on the train, here's the Alaska Railroad cars right here, the train coming in, the railroad tracks right there. There's the Nana River. And across the river here, this is the Denali that most everybody who comes into Alaska during the summer experiences. You've got the Princess Hotel here with the red tops. I think as of last count, there were about 700 hotel rooms at the Princess. The Denali Holland America property is the Chalets is down here, and they've got about 250 hotel rooms. So it's certainly a bit of commercialization that's come into Denali over the last 25 years. And you can see that, of course, when you have your Subways and your GoPros and Harley Davidson store. And that's all, again, fine and beautiful. And I understand that the entrepreneur side of it, but for us, that's not really the Denali that we want you to experience. So we're actually going to take you and we're going to travel 95 miles into the park. After you come off the train that afternoon, we're going to board you on a park bus and we're going to tour in here 89 miles to Kantishna. And actually 92 miles to the very end of the road, where you will stay at the Denali Backcountry Lodge for a couple of nights. Now, one of the things that we've mentioned in the past, and I'll just briefly mention it again today, you'll see here on the map this red line. That red line, and of course, if you read above it, it says private vehicles are restricted to mile 15. No private vehicles can come into Denali National Park further than mile 15. You have to be on a park sponsored or operated bus to travel into the park any further than that 15 miles, which is fine. I'll show you why in just a moment. But really, the reality is this is one way in, one way out. And with all the animals that people have the opportunity to see here along the road, especially from about mile 35 to 95 to 92, this area right here, be a lot of bottlenecking, a lot of rubbernecking, if you will, with the wildlife, and it wouldn't necessarily be safe for people to drive their own vehicles in there. So to get into the park, to really have the opportunity to see the animals, you have to get on one of those park regulated buses. Now, the park tours that most tour operators offer are either called the Tundra Wilderness Tour or the Natural History Tour. The Natural History Tour comes into the park 29 miles. It's about a 4-hour trip where they leave the park entrance. They come in here 29 miles. They turn around and they go back out. That's a trip that you've heard us say it before, and we'll continue to say it until the day that Park Service gets rid of it. That is not a good investment in Denali of your time or your money. If this is a once-in-a-lifetime trip to come to Alaska and to go into Denali, your opportunity of seeing moose and caribou, sheep and bear in the first 29 miles of that park road, pretty slim. In fact, I would say slim to none. I would put the percentage of even seeing 2 of the big four animals at less than 50%. The Tundra Wilderness Tour is a much, much better tour. And that's one that if you're shopping around for Alaska programs, absolutely, I would say that's the minimum, but a much better opportunity to see the big four, because now you're coming in here 62 miles to the Stony Hill Overlook. And I would say your chance of seeing the moose, the caribou, the sheep, and the bear, probably in that upwards of 85 to 90%. But again, we're going to take you another 30 miles in, and we're going to go to Kantishna. The reason, again, that private vehicles aren't allowed inside the park. You see the switchbacks here. You'll notice what is missing. Having a experienced driver with the knowledge of not only what you're seeing, but a knowledge of the road is probably the most important factor when coming into Denali. So you sit back and enjoy the ride, and you let your driver focus on the road while the other 20 people on that bus with you making that journey into Kantishna, they can spend their time focusing on looking for the animals. And this particular animal right here, the first of the four that I'm going to highlight, this is the Dall sheep. This is the reason Denali National Park exists. It became a national park in 1917, thanks to a gentleman named Charles Sheldon who studied these sheep. And it was his ultimate objective to protect these sheep, which were being hunted quite heavily by commercial hunters in Alaska at the time. With the help of a gentleman out of Fairbanks named Judge Wickersham, they were able to pass the national park through the National Park Service and federal government to get this a national park designation in 1917. The moose, probably my favorite animal. To have an encounter with a 1,400-pound moose that stands 6 feet tall at the shoulders and has an inside spread here on these antlers that probably extends to 60, 65, 70 inches. When you start getting up into that 70 to 80 inch range, I don't know how you can tell from afar. They're just darn big. Do you imagine laying down inside the palms, and that's what you could do with some of these animals that are 70 to 80 inches across. That's pretty impressive. And to think about having to carry those around on your head, that's awesome. The largest animal in the deer family is the moose. I would say our guests probably see about 6 to 8 moose on a day trip in and out of Denali. If you're doing the overnight, probably 6 in, 6 out would be about average. Of course, the caribou, number 3 on that list. This picture taken a little later in the summer, probably August. You can tell by the shedding of the velvet on those antlers. And then, of course, the grizzly bears. The big highlight for many people coming into Denali is the grizzly bear. So moose, caribou, sheep, and bear, we call that the Grand Slam. If you see all 4, to make it an absolutely perfect visit to Denali, well, then you get a chance to see this. And this is a picture that is oftentimes used to promote Alaska, to promote Denali National Park. The reality is this picture is taken at about mile 76 of the park road. This is called Reflection Pond. And only about 25,000 of the 600,000 people each year that come to Denali will actually get a chance to see this. And of course, many of our clients and anybody that's on this national park will actually have that opportunity. Over the last 3-4 years, our average in terms of visitors getting a chance to see the summit of Denali in a photo like this, or to see it from Wonder Lake, another different angle, or Talkeetna, we're pushing up over 80% on average of our guests get a chance to see that mountain in its full glory, like it's pictured here. Like I said, at the end of that park road, we'll find Kantishna, the old mining district of Kantishna. In 1905, this was home to about 500 miners. And one little young lady that oversaw the entire operation to make sure everybody was being honest and not shooting each other up and trying to take each other's claims. Fanny Quigley, and you'll learn about Fanny Quigley while you're here in Kantishna. We'll spend our 2 nights at the Denali Backcountry Lodge, pictured right there along Moose Creek. As you can see, some of the people spending their time out doing some mining for gold while they're there. Everybody will get a little satchel of dirt and have a chance to harvest a little of that Alaska gold while they're on property. But it's a great place to just kind of put your feet up and rest. You've covered a lot of territory already at this point with flights into Wrangell, St. Elias, and of course, all the way to Barrow. So having 2 nights here and a full day to just kind of go at your own pace, we really allow for it to create your own adventure. If you want to sit around and read books and play board games in the main lodge, you can do that. If you want to sit around the fire, drink Jameson whiskey in your coffee, nobody's going to tell on you. That's what we would like you to do. You're on vacation. Enjoy yourself. Tell stories. Create fellowship. That's what group travel is all about. There are a number of activities and adventures that are included with your time here. They've got fishing. They've got poles. You can spin cast right there in Moose Creek if you want for trout or Dolly Varden. You can go out to Wonder Lake, and you can fish out here in Wonder Lake as well. These folks are on one of the many hikes that are offered, the guided hikes to Blueberry Hill. You can do some wildlife viewing. And of course, a chance to see the mountain from Wonder Lake, also a great opportunity. So a number of things for you to kind of pick and choose from and create your own day. They've got mountain bikes, some of the other things you can do, of course, gold panning while you're here in Kantishna as well. After our 2 nights in Kantishna, we'll reboard that bus. This is really awesome. Now it's an early morning. We're going to get up and we're going to leave the park. We're going to leave the cabins there in Kantishna by 6 a.m. What I love about this is the early bird actually gets the worm. You've heard that, and that is so true here. Because when we're leaving Kantishna, bound for the front entrance of the park, the first bus leaving the park entrance in the morning to come in to bring guests in also leaves about 6 a.m. So you can imagine we're going to meet about halfway, let's say mile 45. That'll be the first time we encounter another vehicle on that road. And when you get out on this road early in the morning, 6 o'clock, I can't tell you how many times we've come right up here to Wonder Lake and there's moose coming down to get a drink of water in the morning, or they're feeding here on the fresh baby greens that are coming up off the bottom of that marshy lake bottom. And so that first couple hours in the morning between 6 and 8 a.m. can be just spectacular in terms of wildlife viewing. And it'll take about 5 hours to get us back to the park entrance. We'll have lunch at the park entrance, and then we'll reboard our motor coach and we'll head for Talkeetna, Alaska. This is the beautiful Talkeetna, Alaska Lodge where you'll spend an evening. I do encourage you to spend some time downtown in historic downtown Talkeetna. In fact, you'll have vouchers that will allow you to come down here and have dinner. You can go to Nagley's and have dinner. You can go to the Denali Brewing Company and have ribs and chicken and fish, have a glass of their local beer, or of course you can dine in the 3 or 4 star amenities that you have right there at the hotel in the Talkeetna, Alaska Lodge. But do spend some time downtown. It's a really cool city. This was the town site, or the storyline for Northern Exposure. If you remember Northern Exposure, Talkeetna was the town setting for that particular film. So a lot of charm here in Talkeetna. It's probably my favorite city in the interior of Alaska. The next morning, we'll kind of meander out of Talkeetna and work our way back into Anchorage, where we started this adventure. We'll visit the Anchorage Museum, spend a couple of hours here. You'll have time to, again, learn more about the different tribal regions we've already visited, and maybe do a little deeper dive into some of that culture, like the Tlinkits that you may or may not see in Southeast Alaska. The Tlinkits are best known for their totems. Of course, you see our logo. It's very Tlingit, and this raven that I have on my shirt and on all of our printed material. And then after our visit to the museum, we're going to go have a spectacular lunch. That is as if you haven't had enough to eat already. Simon and Seaforts is our destination. You see the view up across Cook Inlet there, spectacular. A great lunch. We'll probably be for an hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes for lunch. And then we'll continue on to Seward, where we're going to spend 2 nights at the beautiful Seward Windsong Lodge. Love this property, nestled out in the woods just outside of town and near Exit Glacier. During our 2 nights in Seward, you will have that opportunity. If you want to take the shuttle over to Exit Glacier, you can certainly do that. There's a National Park Visitor Center there for the Kenai Fjords National Park. But you'll also get a chance to see the visitor center in town as well. And then the next day, we're going to make our journey out into Kenai Fjords National Park. And just so you understand where Kenai Fjords is located, it's on the very south central portion of the Kenai Peninsula right here. Of course, out into these waterways. Denali National Park is where we were a couple of nights ago. We traveled about 200 miles down to Anchorage, and then Seward itself is about 125 miles south of Anchorage, and that's where we're going to spend our 2 nights. This trip into Kenai Fjords that we're going to do by small boat is about an 8-hour trip full of wildlife. I'm going to flip back for just a second here. Because of the coastal currents that come off the Aleutian Islands and the migration of the fish, primarily the halibut and salmon, this area right here known as Resurrection Bay in the Gulf of Alaska, this is some of the richest fishing grounds in all of Alaska. And of course, when you have rich fishing and other rich sea life, then you get the marine wildlife that follows in. So a lot of orcas, a lot of whales, as you saw in the picture previously, sea lions, sea otters, puffins, eagles. This is just this is a mecca of marine wildlife. And it's going to be a fast 8.5 hours when you consider all the animals that you're going to see along the way, from, like I said, the orcas. And this is a big male orca. You can tell by the dorsal fin there. Oftentimes these, well, actually flop over a little bit, but the females will have a shorter. And there's about, last I looked, there's about 30 pods that are in the different pods that are in the south central Alaska region between Prince William Sound and Kenai Fjords here. So real good chance to see these orcas. And then of course the humpback whales as well, feeding on these very rich waters. But the major highlight for most will be a visit into the Northwest Passage and into the Tidewater glaciers. We'll see Bear Glacier, we'll see Elias Glacier, and we're going to spend about 30 minutes or so in front of that glacier watching for it to calve. And of course, that's that ice breaking loose and crumbling down into the water below. Keep in mind when you're seeing these glaciers, a couple of things. You'll notice on the boat, there's outside deck viewing, and there's, of course, climate-controlled interior. Take your mittens and your hats, take your long johns, layer up for this particular day. Because when you're inside, you just don't get the appreciation and the reward as you would if you were outside. To hear the crackling and the popping, it's almost like Rice Krispies in a bowl, all this ice that's floating in the water around your boat. And then to hear that white thunder, as the natives call it, that big crack and thunderous roar as that ice falls down 200 feet and into the water below, you can imagine the concussion that creates. So, you're only in front of that glacier for 30, 40 minutes or so, but you're out in the open water for a good chunk of the day. So having those layers, I think, is really key, and it's going to only enhance and heighten your experience with these tidewater glaciers. So after our 2 nights in Seward, we'll head back into Anchorage, and we will overnight in Anchorage. For many people, that would become the end of their land program. But for those who are interested in seeing the other national parks like Glacier Bay, we actually have an opportunity with our small boat partners to fly guests from Anchorage down to the city of Juneau. And in Juneau, of course, this gives us quick access into Glacier Bay National Park, which is pictured right here, just to the northwest of Juneau. We'll do that via catamaran, or we have options on the overnight vessel with Alaska Dream Cruise as well. And with both of these options, these small boat adventures, Alaska Dream Cruise's Admiralty Dream, this vessel only holds about 50 passengers total, or the catamaran product that we have, which will only hold 40 people maximum. We'll be able to get into, probably see 5 or 6 different glaciers, including John Hopkins Glacier. We'll come in here through Gustavus and Port Gustavus. We'll go into the visitor center, and then we'll spend the whole day touring Glacier Bay National Park, from the Muir Inlet to the Muir Fjords and Glacier up to Marjorie Glacier and Grand Pacific Glacier. And then right here, ladies and gentlemen, this is the John Hopkins Inlet and John Hopkins Glacier. During the summer, this is closed to all vessels over 250 passengers, so all cruise ships, from May 31st until August 25th approximately. And so these small vessels give us the opportunity to go in here and to see what is the busiest pupping ground for the seals in all of Alaska right here. And then, of course, the glimpse of the beautiful John Hopkins Glacier. You also get the Lampoon Glacier, the Reed Glacier. And this is just a rich, again, very wildlife-rich cruise, not just with the marine wildlife, but also oftentimes we'll see sheep, we'll see goats, we'll see bear on the shoreline. And then, of course, the entrance into Glacier Bay with, again, the traffic of marine population through here. Great opportunity to see the humpback whales as well. And this is what we call the bubble net, when they're working together to feed on that krill that's in the water. And there's the beautiful John Hopkins Glacier up in the John Hopkins Inlet. Like I say, probably less than 10,000 people a year get a chance to see this, and it's quite a glacier. And the really cool thing about visiting Glacier Bay and visiting some of these other bays like Twin Sawyer Glacier on our Alaska Dream Cruise product, the small overnight vessel, is that they actually tow this dib behind them, and that dib will take about 12 people at a time out onto the water and even get you a little closer to those glaciers and to those ice formations or to the seals and sea lions. That's spectacular to get that close to Mother Nature like that. Now, if you're interested in seeing the other national parks that I mentioned early on that are not included with our national park program, absolutely it can be done. Kobuk Valley, as I said, sits just about 1.2 million acres of protected land here. It's about a 30-minute flight from Kotzebue, Alaska. So Alaska Airlines actually has a flight that leaves Anchorage in the morning, approximately 7 a.m., returns back to Anchorage at 7 p.m. So you got about 12 hours in this day. So you fly up to Kotzebue. It's about a 2.5-hour, 3-hour tour over here to Kobach Valley, where you will actually land right there on the desert. And yes, there is a desert above the Arctic Circle in the great sand dunes of Kobach Valley. And this place right here, ladies and gentlemen, will actually see in the upwards of 100 degrees Fahrenheit every summer. They get one massive swing in temperatures, much like Fairbanks does. 80, 85, 90, 95 degrees is not uncommon, and they will push almost 100 degrees in this desert above the Arctic Circle in Kobach Valley. The other national park that I had mentioned, if it's something you want to do and you want to collect those stamps, is Lake Clark National Park. Lake Clark is just about, an hour-long float plane trip from Anchorage, a little over an hour over here to Lake Clark to spend the day. A lot of guests will come over here with Lake Clark Air. They'll fly out of our other airport in Anchorage and again fly over here, spend the day. It's about an 8-9 hour day and then fly back into Anchorage for the evening. The draw here is the beauty itself, the falls that are at Lake Clark, but also for some doing the day trip from Anchorage, they'll opt to fly with one of the smaller operators and do some incredible bear viewing as well. A lot of bears in the Lake Clark area. If you're an outdoor enthusiast and you really want to do the bear and fishing thing, Lake Clark's another great place where you can do some salmon fishing and bear viewing all at the same time. There's a couple lodges you can fly into on Crescent Lake and actually fish and have brown bears in the distance there watching you fish and probably trying to steal your salmon at times. It's pretty incredible.